Good evening, this is Angela with Parkos Permaculture. It is a perfect, picturesque evening here in Portland, and I am sitting out in my front yard, permaculture food forest, enjoying the last rays of light filtering in. So while I'm out here working on a few obligations that need to be taken care of because the garden doesn't rest, Mother Nature doesn't rest, and the garden progresses whether or not we have time in our schedule to tend to her. I'm out here just spending a few minutes, and honestly, in a permaculture garden, sometimes a few minutes is all it takes in the morning or the evening to do a once over, a stroll of your property, and just see what needs a little bit of attention here and there. This evening, one of the things that needs attention are some of my basil plants. I thought this is the perfect opportunity to share with you all my strategies for growing the biggest, most abundant crops of basil possible. So basil is frequently cultivated in Africa and Asia and originates in a really warm climate. For those of us in a temperate zone like me here in Oregon in the United States, it has to be started early indoors. And I find that I start my basil seed like March-ish indoors. I'm doing well for the season if that's when I get it going. It's okay to start it even earlier, like February. But basil thrives in hot weather and is very frost sensitive. Not only frost sensitive, but just if temperatures are below about 60, it just doesn't grow. It just sits there like a rock. And if it's below 40, it can get damage and really be stunted and impaired. So it is too late to start basil from seed for most of us at this point in the year in mid-June. I do tend to start a round of seeds about now, and then I can baby them in a cold frame or a greenhouse and continue to get harvests into late October. However, it's not too late for you to have basil in your garden right now. You can buy starts in the store, and that's totally a feasible way to grow your own basil. You may wonder if it's economically beneficial or prudent to buy basil starts. They can be a little spendy, especially the organic ones, but look at the cost of a jar of pesto. And I want to share with you today my 2 tips for really increasing the yield you get out of either your store-bought basil start or the seedlings that you have started from seed earlier in the season. You can triple or quadruple the yield that you get out of one basil plant by following 2 simple techniques. So because we tend to have cool springs, and sometimes our summers aren't even really that hot here, basil can be kind of stunted or slowed down by the cool soil temperatures. And I found that even though I grow a bunch in the soil, it never does as well as the basil that I grow in a pot, particularly growing it in a black plastic pot that absorbs and radiates heat. They really like warm roots. So if you grow your basil in the ground, you may find that it does not get as big, is not as vigorous as basil grown in a dark pot. Additionally, basil needs a full 6 to 8 hours of sun per day. It particularly benefits from morning sunshine. If you live in a very hot climate, it may benefit from afternoon shade, but where I am, it doesn't need any shade at all the entire year. If you don't give it the adequate soil warmth and sunshine, what you find is that it just doesn't grow very big. So I have my basils in my pots. They're super happy. They're probably twice as big as my basil plants in the ground, even though the seeds were all started at the same time. So what I find is that by the end of the season, I get a slightly bigger yield from the basil grown in pots versus in the ground. It just gets a little jump start from the extra heat. And sometimes the basil in the ground catches up and sometimes not. But there are 2 ways that you can ensure that either your basil in the ground or in a pot will give you 2, 3, 4 times as much of a yield. The first technique is to, once your basil has a set of 2 to 6 real leaves, is to come in and pinch out the top. And I'm doing that this evening. This is my simple, easy chore that I notice that my basil needs right now. So you come in here, it's hard to see in these really big, lush, abundant basil leaves. This is grown in straight leaf mold, by the way, nothing added. There are 6 sets of true leaves on this basil, but I come in here and I pinch off the top 2 to 4 with my fingernails. And if you've ever heard with gardening plants, the Chelsea chop, how in May you come in and you chop your flowering plants back, and that encourages them to produce side shoots and become bushier, shorter, less willowy and prone to falling over. And also it helps them produce twice as many flowers. The same technique works on your basil as the Chelsea chop. So here you can see we have 3 sets of true leaves. 1, 2, 3. And we're starting to get a 4th. I'm a little bit late here. I want to come in and pinch out the crown. And by doing so, I am encouraging all these little side shoots here, and here to branch out. And all these little side shoots here, look at this little tiny one here, to branch out and produce big, big leaves that they wouldn't produce otherwise. So here's another one. I want to come in here and pinch out, and my plant will become much more lush, thick, and set a heavy, heavy set of basil leaves this year. Because you are taking the terminal end of the plant and pinching it off, you are encouraging the leaf nodes along the stalk that rest in the crook of each of the, between the main stem and the leaves. There's a little leaf node here, and sometimes they set little baby leaves. You are encouraging each of those leaf nodes to branch into a full, big, vigorous, loaded with leaf producing stem. So this sort of mimics the way browsers in nature come along and shear off, nibble off the tops of plants, and that encourages them to grow lush and bushy and more vegetative production. Totally what we're doing here, we're mimicking that. Now, all of these little pieces that you pinch off, eat them, put them in a salad, or chop them on your pasta, chop them and freeze them. There's usually so few at this point in the season that I can't make pesto with it, but I definitely put them into my homemade pasta sauce, or I just chop them and put them up in a salad. Really, really tasty. So when you pinch off the top of your plant, you're going to find very quickly that it becomes larger, wider, and sets many, many more leaves than it would otherwise. So my second tip for how to get a bigger harvest out of your basil is that if you have consistent high temperatures and intense sun, your basil may start to bolt. It may try to flower and finish its life cycle. You know what? The technique of pinching back works here too. You can come in and pinch back the plant, removing all of the bolting tissue, all of the, you notice the leaves will get spindlier and smaller, and it'll get ready to send up a flower stalk. Pinch all of that off. And that suppresses the plant's natural urge to flower and set seed and die, and will encourage it to put out more leaves. So I hope that this little set of tips helped you. I know for me, it's an easy, simple 5-minute chore in the garden. As I'm wandering around, I notice my basil in the ground and in my pots, and I just pinch and collect in my apron all of these little leaves, and my basil will start to produce a more dense and productive set of leaves for me, and I will get a much bigger harvest. And for our family, that means a winter of many dinners of pesto and pasta, pesto and polenta, pesto and mushrooms, and pesto on baked potatoes, and you name it, my kids will eat pesto on it. They love it. I always run out. And so this year I have made an effort to grow 3 times as many plants as normal, so that when I pinch back my basil plants, I will hopefully have 12 times as many leaves to harvest later in the summer to make my homemade jars of pesto, which will go into the freezer to eat all winter long. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please consider subscribing. It really helps the algorithm favor my channel and helps me reach more people with the message of permaculture and sustainable living. Thank you.